Okay. Today we're going to start on Yud Aleph, on the Aleph, right? 11a, about the Mishnah. Thank Hashem that you're able to learn Torah every day. In this chus of learning, you have to be Mikdash immediately. And we're learning in the memory of Sahava Golda Bas Baruch Binyamin. Also for anyone that needs Refor Shlema. Okay. Mishnah says, Reis and Ratzon Acher Metzia. Someone sees people running through his yard, and they're running after a lost object that's in his yard. Or Acher Tzvi Shaver, they're running after I'm sorry. The Acher Metzia is the example of the Metzia is a deer that can't run. It has a broken leg. Acher Geisles, Shlei Parchu, or it's after birds that can't fly. That's what they're running. Basically, they're running after things that can't get out of his property. Easy to catch. But Amar, and he says, Zachsali Sadai. Why should he have to chase them? He owns the field. So he says, my field acquires it. They didn't catch it yet. And they're in his field. So Zachsali, it works. He acquires it, they're running, and turns out that he acquires it before them. Question is if he really has to say that, or if he's just saying it to tell them that you lost it, or maybe, does he have to say anything for his field to work? Probably not.
Well, it's not like someone left it there in the field or something.
The animal somehow made it in. Right. The question is if for his field to make an acquisition, does he have to make a pronouncement? Okay, so the next case was let's say it was a regular deer that could run properly, or it was birds that could fly. Basically, they can get out of the field. So Va'amar, and he says, says my field should acquire. So it says Layam, that doesn't work. If it's not contained in his field, so then his field doesn't acquire. Whereas if he wouldn't be able to catch it, then his field also doesn't work. Rav Yehuda is a famous student of Shmuel, and he says, all of this only works when he's standing next to his field. He has to be standing next to his field for his field to acquire. The Gemara asks, why doesn't his field acquire automatically? The sage in Eretz Yisrael says later on, he says that the person's courtyard can acquire even without his knowledge. So why are we saying that it only works if he's standing next to him? He doesn't even have to know about it and it works. Kasha and Shmuel. Shmuel can argue on Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, but it seems Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina was accepted. It says, Hani mili b'chatzer mishtameres. Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, who's the sage in Eretz Yisrael, later sage, he says, he's talking about in a courtyard that's guarded, that's fenced around it, and it's locked. But if it's not guarded, if it's not locked, then the owner has to be standing next to it for it to make an acquisition. Okay, so now we understand what Rav Yehuda Mishmol said, because he's talking about a field that's not locked, right? It's not guarded. So then it's going to work. Not Tamra. From where do we know the Chatzar Sheini Mishtameres that in a field that's not guarded, it's not protected? Where do you get that from? That you have to be standing there for it to work. What's your source for this? This is what Rabbi Yehuda Mishmol says. And what's the source? It's going to take us a few lines to get till the end of the source, but you have to bear with the Gemara. The source is from a Brisa. It says, let's say we have a field owner that's in the city. And he says like this, I know my workers. I left the bundles in the field, and I know that one of the bundles that I left, the workers are going to forget. So I'm just pronouncing now that I didn't forget it. I'm pronouncing that it should not be forgotten. I'm remembering it. Shikha is that if you forget a bundle in the field, after you've done everything else, you forget something in the field that belongs to the poor people. So he's saying that I didn't forget it. I don't want it to belong to the poor people. You should know that I remember that it's there. So the Gemara, so the Brisa says, Yachal layei shikha. Maybe it should not be shikha because he remembered it. It says that if you forget a field in the field, if you forget a bundle in the field, so in the field it's considered forgotten, but not in the city. In the city it's not considered forgotten. So now there's a problem with the way the sentence started and the way it ended. Originally it says, Yachal lo yehi shikha. Perhaps it should not be forgotten, which means, how's that supposed to conclude? No, it is forgotten, right? Maybe it should not be considered shikha. It comes to tell me it is shikha, right? But in the end it says, comes to tell me that it's not shikha. It's the problem with the wording of the Brisa. It says Hagufa Kasha. The problem is the Brisa is self-contradictory. Amrit Yachalei Shikha. You're saying that maybe it should not be considered shikha because the owner remembered it, right? The owner remembered it. Now, there's one detail here that I left out. The owner, even if the owner forgets it afterwards, it's not shikha. That's what we're thinking, that because he remembered it at a certain point, even if he forgets it later, it's not shikha. Maybe we should consider it not shikha. Alma, what do we see? Avishikha. Perhaps it's not shikha. Perhaps you should say that it's not shikha. That would teach me that it, yes, is shikha. It is considered forgotten. B'nasav l'gemara, and then the Gemara spells it out. It says basada b'shachachta v'lei be'ir. It's only shikha. It's only considered forgotten if it's in the field, but not if you're in the city. Amalei avishikha. We see that if in the city, it's not shikha. Gemara explains like this. Elav hachi kamar. Rather, what it means is to say is like all of this is just to tell me that if you're standing next to the field, then your field acquires for you, and if you're not standing next to the field, your field doesn't acquire for you. We'll have to figure out how that fits back into the original wording. It goes like this: if you're in the field and you forget it, and the workers forget it, it's considered shikha. But let's say you put it there intentionally. Right? You put something down intentionally. You put it, you know where you put it, and then the workers forget it. So the rule is, ain't shikha, it's not considered shikha when you're in the field. Why? We'll see in a second. My timer, what's the reason? Even the because since you're standing there, you're in the field, so your field acquires for you. That was the point that we wanted to get from this. The point of Rabbi Yehuda and Shmuel is that your field will acquire for you if you're standing there. Now, what about if you're in the city? But in the city, even if you remember it, right, it means even if you put it down somewhere and you know that it's there, but then the workers forget it, so then havishikha, that's considered forgotten. My time, what's the reason? Because you're not there to acquire it. What happened is that it would automatically become yours. You know, it's like it's starting to become hefker because they're forgetting it, but it would come back to becoming yours by you remembering it. Now, that doesn't mean that you're like the poor person that's acquiring it. I think it just means that it's not considered forgotten. Okay, now, if you go back to the Brisa and try to figure out what it was talking about, you'd say it like this: while you're in the field, then in order for it to be shikha, then you need to forget it. But in the city, we don't need you to forget it, because even if the workers forget it, that's enough.
Is this saying that you have to actually be in your field at the time that
The workers forget it.
If
the workers forget it, but you're in the field, then your field acquires it.
Mm-hmm. So if you put it there,
yeah, we didn't get into the statement. The statement, we weren't sure if the statement means if the statement is significant or not. Yeah.
Are the workers are like shliach or in this case or not necessarily?
But the workers are the ones that cause it to be shikha. Your work, yeah, as if it's your shliach, exactly. Workers are the same as the owner. Right. Right. But if the owner's in the field, then his field will acquire it from him.
But if he's not in the field, his owners can acquire it. No? I mean, his workers. He's not in the field.
Is that not in the field, and the workers forgot it?
Oh,
Then the poor people acquire it. Then it goes to the poor.
so his property doesn't necessarily always retroactively claim ownership.
Right. Only if he's standing there. That's what we learned. That's what we're learning from this. Only if he's there. If he's there, his property acquires it.
Think of like a kite, like it blows in the wind and falls on the property and then it blows off again. So I guess like when it leaves the second time.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay, so this was meant to be a source for Yehuda Amar Shmuel that says that if you're standing next to a field, you'll acquire it. We seem to prove this from the laws of shikha, that if you're standing there, it won't be shikha, even if the workers forget it, because you remembered it at the beginning. But if you're not in the field, then the workers forget that's everything. The workers forgetting is everything if you're not there. Well, the Gemara says, Mimai, how do you know that this is a real source for this? Maybe the reason why shikha matters if you forget it, the reason why it matters if you forget it or if you don't forget it, that's because that's what the pasuk says. It has nothing to do with your field acquiring for you if you're standing there, if your field doesn't acquire for you, you're not standing there. It doesn't have to do with that. It has to do with who matters, who forgets, is the guy that's standing in the field. It says, maybe it's Exer Sakasib. Amar Kra, the Gemara says, no. It's not true. We have a pasuk that says that you should not return to take it. That means that even if you're in the city, okay, now is this pasuk part of the question or part of the answer?
I'm not even sure where I am.
Let me see your.
Is it?
Yeah, let me see what yours says.
This situation, yeah, it's because
Verse states, 1 second. The Gemara answers. It's impossible to say the shikha law applies only when the owner is still in the field. But the verse says, what the Gemara was asking is maybe there's no such thing as shikha if the owner's in the city. The Gemara says no, because even it says you don't return to take it, even if you're in the city, there's still shikha. So really what the Gemara wanted to do here was switch the whole pshat in the brisa. That would say that only when the owner is in the field is there even a possibility of shikha, that it's going to be ownerless. But if the owner's in the city, then it can't be shikha at all. That would switch the whole pshat. The Gemara brings a pasuk that says no, even if he's in the field, even if he's in the city, there still is the concept of shikha. Okay.
this example is because it's like like if they leave the bundle behind, it becomes like paya. Right. Otherwise, like any other item, it's the owner of the field.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a special halacha of harvesting grain. So the Gemara says,
why is it talking about grain and not called grapes?
well, it has to do with, I'm saying that because of the bundles. But it could be the same thing would apply to other things as well. Bundles, the grain, they would bundle up into Haimi Baile Lalav. What do you tell me that this pasuk is teaching me that the concept of shikha even applies when you're in the city and it's forgotten that it's the same thing will happen? You're telling me that you have an extra pasuk. You don't have an extra pasuk. That pasuk tells me that you're not allowed to go back to take it. Forget about the city. Imkain, the Gemara says, if so, if it's only teaching me that you're not allowed to go back to take the bundle that you forgot, then the pasuk should say that you shouldn't take it. My Sasha, what does it mean? Don't return to take it. The extra word is coming to teach me that even if you're not in the city, the law of shikha still applies. And not in the field, the law of shikha still applies. But that pasuk is needed for something else. It says shalafanav ain't shikha, shalachrav yeshikha, shehu b'bal tashuv. You see, the guy's harvesting. He walks up and down the rows of his field. So if there's something that's ahead of him that he doesn't reach, and he decided that, okay, my day's over, let me go back. So he goes home for the night, and he didn't finish the thing. So is everything left there considered shikha? No, because that was still ahead of him on the row. Whatever was ahead of him, what he didn't reach yet, is not considered shikha. The only things that he already had harvested and passed, that's considered shikha. So the pasuk teaches me like don't return things that you've passed already. That's going to be shikha. So if I need the leisashav to teach me where in the field is shikha, then it's not teaching me that shikha applies even if the owner is in the city. Amar Ravashi answers this. He says, I have a pasuk that teaches me that there's shikha even if he's in the city, which leaves me now to say that it's not considered a gzeirus akasav, that there's no such thing as shikha if the owner is in the city. Rather, there is shikha if the owner is in the city. The only question is, if the owner is remembered it and he's in the field, and the workers forgot it, so then if the owner's in the field, then the field would acquire for him because he's standing next to it. And if he's not in the field, then he won't acquire it because he's not next to it. His workers forgetting it will be everything. Now we go back. We got a statement from Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel that says if he's standing next to the field, then his field acquires for him. Ula says the same thing. If he's standing next to his field acquires for him. Rabbi Barbachan also says this. We have three opinions here. Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Ula, and Rabbi Barbachan all say that your field acquires if you're standing next to it. Okay. Rabbi has a question to Ula. Ula says that the field only works if you're standing next to it. He says, 1 second. We have a Mishnah in Meiser Sheni. It says, Meiser Bram Gamliel v'zakenim she'yabay masfina. You have Rabbi Gamliel and the elders that were on the boat. Amar Rabbi Gamliel. Gamliel says, Iser Shani Yasid Lamed. What happened was, Rabbi Gamliel remembered that he had grain in his house that he had not taken tithe from. So he says, when I get home, I'm going to separate tithe. But meanwhile, the separation and the measuring of the tithe that I'm going to do, because tithe is done by measuring, right? So that what I'm going to do, that's given right now. I'm giving it already to Yeshua, who was together with him on the boat. That's Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanani. He was a Levi. Gemara tells us he was a Levi. He was actually by the Simchas Beis Sheva. The Gemara says that he was one of the singers. Yeah, yeah. Levium had two jobs. They took care of the gates, or they were singers. Yeshua ben Hanani was one of the singers in the Beis Hamikdash. So anyway, he was a Levi, so a Levi gets the Meiser. So Gamliel says that I'm giving it to the Meiser, even though neither of us are home, but I'm already giving it to Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanani, even here while we're on the boat. How's Yeshua ben Hanani going to acquire it if he's not there? So it says, don't worry, I'm renting to him the place. He rents him the area where the grain is on. He's going to acquire the Meiser from that. But basically what we're seeing from this is that Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanania can acquire based on ownership of his property. Doesn't own it, but he's renting it, which is good enough. Based on that, even though he's not standing next to it, he could still acquire the Meiser. It's a kasha on Ula and Shmuel and Rabbi Barbachana that you don't have to be standing next to it to acquire it, because Rabbi Gamliel is giving it to him, even though he's not standing next to it.
We learned this earlier about like part of the field. To give part of the field, I think was like as a collateral.
He's giving the property, and then Rabbi Yeshua ben Hanan is going to acquire it based on being on his property. But how could he acquire based on being on his property? According to them, those three views, it's only if he's standing next to it. He's together with Rabbi Gamliel on the boat. He's not near the property.
We learned recently, like if we want to give something over to someone, we give them part of the field, and whatever is in that part of the field, he
Very good. Very good. The Gemara is going to ask that. Very good. Very good. Wait a minute. First, let's see what the proof is, and then we'll see what the answer is. And then I have another type that I have to give to the poor. I guess it was the year of the Maiserani. It was the 3rd year or the 6th year. So I'm going to give it Nasan Akiva ben Yosef. Apparently, Rabbi Akiva, his name was Akiva ben Yosef. He is the Gabbai Tzedakah for the poor. I'm giving it to him, so he should be able to give it to the poor. The Gemara asks, and so this is Rababa. You think they were standing next to the field? They were on the boat. So how could you say that Ram Gamliel gives them the property in their field, and then the field acquires it? Amarle, Ula says to Rababa, this rabbi looks like he never studied in his life. He's asking, he doesn't even bother answering. Anyway, Rababa makes his way to Surah. Amalu, he says to them, this is what Ula said. This is my question on him. And he didn't answer me. So one of the sages there said, what are you asking? Your question's not a question. Ram Gamliel wasn't giving them the property and then they're going to acquire the grain because they own the property. Ram Gamliel was doing a type of transaction over here where the transfer of the grain is transferred through the transfer of the property, which means that since property could be acquired with money, grain is not acquired with money. Grain is acquired with lifting it up, right? Putting it into your property, but it's not acquired with money. So how's he going to make a transaction here when they're on the boat? So he says, what I'll do is like this. I'll transfer the property through the money, right? And there's the type of transaction also, which is when you want to transfer property and something else, so you can tag it along with the property. Agav. Together with the property comes also the grain. They weren't acquiring the grain because it was on the property. They're acquiring the grain because the transaction on the property works together with the grain. So it's a transaction thing. It's not a acquire it because it's sitting on their property and their property acquires. In other words, the question was, we see that you don't need to stand next to the property to acquire. He said, but that's a different type of acquisition. Here it's the transfer type of acquisition, not just the being on the property. Okay, that's a good answer. Rab Zera Kibla. Rab Zera, here's the answer from the sage, this one of the students, and he accepts it. Rababa le Kibla, but Rababa, who asked the question, he doesn't accept that answer. Doesn't like the answer. Rababa is the one that's asking Tula. So he says, Amar Rava. So Rava says, Shapa Ravad like Kibla. Rababa is correct for not accepting the answer. It's not a good answer. It says, if you wanted to do a transfer, you could have used the cloth. Could have used you hand the cloth to the seller, and then the item goes to the even if it's movable property, even if it's personalty, even if it's grain, you can acquire things like that with the cloth, with chalipin. What you do is the purchaser hands a handkerchief to the seller. When the seller lifts up the handkerchief, all the items that he's trying to transfer over, it's as if it's an exchange. Remember, you can exchange a donkey for a cow. Remember that story? And even though they weren't next to the cow at all, but he just gave the donkey over. So then automatically the cow goes into his possession, right? We had a question if it had a calf and we didn't know whose. So here you would transfer the cloth over to the seller, and then the property would go immediately over to Rabbi Yeshua. All he has to do is hand the cloth to Gamliel, and all the grain would go.
When they're someplace else, they're not on the property. They're not.
what I'm saying? Like
Right. It just goes automatic. It's a type of transfer. It's like click here for purchase. Click here, and there's do not press
it
back. Don't
charge it multiple times.
So the same thing is you hand it over. It's going to work. So Rub is saying if you're trying to look for a transaction, there was an easier transaction. He just has to hand them a handkerchief. So why didn't he use the handkerchief? And the reason why he didn't use a handkerchief is because there's a major problem here. Rabbi Gamliel doesn't own this. He owns the grain, but some of the grain is meant to be owned by the Levi. He only has to separate it and hand it over. So what's happening is it's not his ability to separate it and hand it over to whoever he wants. That right to give it to this Levi or to that Levi, that's called Tevasana. It's called the right of pleasure to give it to whoever you want. Okay, now that right is not considered money. So what can I transfer with a handkerchief? I can only transfer something that I actually own. But since there's no ownership to this right, what does Ram Gamliel own here? Just the ability to give it to whoever he wants. But doesn't really own it. So because of that, you can't transfer it with a handkerchief. Oh, you can't transfer it with the handkerchief. Then you can't also transfer it with the property. So how does he acquire the grain? Not because of it's a transfer, but rather it's because it's on his property. Now that's why Rav Abba didn't accept it. So it says, the Tevasana doesn't have enough value that you can transfer it with a handkerchief. So also it doesn't have enough value that it should be acquired by acquiring property. It would only be possible to be acquired by being on the property, but not through the transaction type of acquisition. The Gemara says that, okay, Rava, you're explaining why Rav Abba didn't accept it, but V'laihi, that's not actually accurate. Because Matnes Kun and Nesina Ksivabu, they had a separate problem. The problem is that by Matnes Kuna, it says it has to be given. What's given to the Kohen, what's given to the Levi, that needs to be given as a gift, not as a sale, not as a business. So Chalipin, if he would transfer it over in a way of an exchange, you give me the cloth. You give me the cloth. Good again. Thank you. You give me the cloth and I'll give you the meiser. Says that doesn't work because that's considered a business. Metaltalin, agav bekarka nesina limtu. But to acquire it,
with the thing with the symbolic exchange of the cloth, it says he didn't have a cloth. Is that why he couldn't make a exchange?
no, he was surprised. He says, why, if you're trying just to do a transfer, then why did you have to give him property for the transfer? You can do a transfer through a handkerchief. It must be that the handkerchief doesn't work.
Yeah.
Why does the handkerchief not work? That's because it doesn't have value, because it's not considered his. It's just the right to give it to him. So if it doesn't have value, then you also can't do a transfer through property.
Because it wasn't his handkerchief?
No,
because it just wasn't working out.
No, because the meiser doesn't belong to Rabbi Gamliel. Meiser belongs to the Levium.
Even before you separate it?
Yeah, it belongs to the Levium. The only thing is he has to separate it and hand it over. So how's he going to hand it over? So he doesn't really have any ownership in it to do that type of transaction.
They belong to Hashem, kind of like the firstborn.
No, those are holy. Meiser is not holy. It's something else. Yeah, this is like Truma is different, but we're talking about Truma here. Well, so what we're coming out with is like this. If he would have used the cloth, that would have been a transaction, a business transaction. So that's why he didn't use the cloth. But really, he could have used the he could have given it to him by transferring the property. So it not necessarily is this a proof. In other words, that what this fellow answered is correct. This rabbi said that We're not saying that your property can acquire for you even if you're not standing there. We're not saying that. We're saying that the property being transferred was fine to transfer along with it also the grain. So I'm sorry. So metalton agav mekarka, but movable property together with land, nesina limti. That's considered a gift. If you didn't pay for the property that's coming, so it's considered a gift. If you had it to do a transfer for the movable property for the grain, that's considered business. But if the only transfer that's happening here, the only transaction that's happening here is the fact that he's acquiring the property, and together with acquiring the property comes along a gift, that's a perfect gift, and that's fine. And that could have been the way that he was, Rabbi Gamliel was giving it to Rabbi Yeshua. Okay, that answers the question on Ula. Rav Papa says another answer. He says, Das acheres maknes and shani. Ula said that you need to be standing next to the field in order for your field to acquire. That's only if you're acquiring from Hefker, where there's no one that's giving it to you. You're the one that's acquiring it is doing everything. But let's say there's someone that's gifting it to you. So then you don't have to be standing there next to the field, because the one that's giving it to you is doing half of the intention here, and then your field is doing the other half. If you're trying to do everything on your own, you're trying to acquire without anyone giving it to you, so then you have to be standing there. It needs to be stronger. But when someone's actually handing it over to you, so that's going to be different. You don't need to be standing there. I mean, not Tamra. How do you know that you don't need to be standing there, or that you do need to be standing there if it's from Hefker? Well, it says like this. We go back to the Mishnah. It says that if someone sees people running after a lost object, so that's Hefker. And we said over there that you need to be standing next to the field. Rabbi Yirmiyah says, name of Rabbi Yochanan, again, you have to be able to run after it and catch it. That's when it's going to be, you don't have to actually catch it, you have to be able to catch it. That's when your field can acquire for you.
Take, for instance, you have a field. Is the acquisition the field itself, or can it be the airspace of the field as well?
Airspace as well. We're going to see at the end of this Gemara that it's better if it's on the ground.
Well, we'll see.
That's a different story. That's we're talking about it because it has a broken leg, or the birds don't fly. So we're saying that's why you can run after it and catch it. That's when the field will acquire. By Rabbi Yirmiyah, and Rabbi Yirmiyah has a question: how would it work if it was a gift? The same thing or not? If it would have been a gift, then you don't have to even be able to catch it. Which means, my timer, what's the reason for that? Why is there less restrictions, less qualifications for your field to acquire when someone's giving you a gift? It says, it's because when someone else is giving it to you, there's two parts to this acquisition. There's a person that's transferring it to you, and then there's your field acquiring it. So even if you're not able to reach it, but someone is giving it to you, so then you could acquire it. The same thing would apply that if you're not standing next to it, your field should be able to acquire, because there's less restrictions if someone's giving it to you. And that we see from that Mishnah in the statement of Rabbi Yirmiyah. This was a lost object. That's why they said that you have to be standing next to it. But if someone would be giving it to you, then you don't have to be standing there. So Rav Papa is explaining why Rabbi Gamliel was able to give to Rabbi Yeshua, even though Rabbi Yeshua wasn't standing next to the field. The reason is because Rabbi Gamliel was giving it. Das acheres. If someone's giving it, it's different than finding a lost object. Amar Rav Simi Rav Papa. Simi asked a question to Rav Papa. Rav Papa was the one that came up with this difference, that it's different if someone is giving it to you. Rav Simi has a question. He says, 1 second. When it comes to a Jewish divorce, there's the husband that's giving it to the wife. And Ula says, Ula said exactly the same thing. That she has to be standing next to her courtyard and next to her house if the husband throws it in there in order for her to acquire it. So if the whole idea over here that if someone else is giving it to you, then you don't have to be there, then by the get, for sure it should work, right? She shouldn't have to be there. My answer is Shani get Isabel Karcha. Get is different because a get could be given against her will. That means the husband can throw it at her, even she says, I don't want it, but she's still divorced. If it goes into her property or something like that.
She doesn't have to.
So therefore, even though normally when someone is giving it to you or to her or to whatever, someone's giving it to someone else, so then you don't have to be there. But by the get, because it could be done against her will, then she does have to be there.
Oh, she does have to be there?
Yeah, by the get.
So you
Must.
can't just put in her mailbox when she's out of town?
No, she would have to be there. Yeah. Or maybe if it's a mistameris, maybe she doesn't have to be there. Maybe if you put it through the hole in the door, no one can open it. Maybe that would be good. Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense.
May place his wife's debt into her house for courtyard to affect it.
If she's standing there.
No, like also the example that you said, like put in her property.
I know, but Ula says only if she's standing there. But I want to know, would Ula say only if she's standing there if it's a chatzar mishtameres? I think it's not. I think he doesn't have to be there.
Is number 20. Oh, yeah. Are we in 11A?
11b.
Because then it's number 20. And then it
That's my I'll see it in the halach there. The case where a husband threw a bill of divorce into his wife's courtyard, if she was standing in the courtyard was secured, she has acquired the bill of divorce and the divorce is valid. If she was not present, the divorce is not valid. So this is talking about even if the courtyard was secured. Yeah, so it only works.
number 20. And then it adds unos.
Okay, that doesn't tell me if the courtyard's secured or not. It changes. Okay. So Maskeflor of Sheshes Breder Abidi. But what we're holding right now is that we said that normally if someone else is giving you something, then you don't have to be standing in the courtyard. But by a get, it's different since a get could be given against the will of the recipient. So then the recipient has to be standing by the courtyard for it to work. So Maskeflor of Sheshes Breder Avidi. Rav Sheshes Breder Avidi has a question on Rav Papa. Shouldn't this be a kal v'chaimer? It should be exactly the opposite. Uma get isabal karcha. Get could be given against the will. That means that it's stronger. That means there's less of a reason for her to be there. It could, even if you throw it at her, and still, only if she's standing there would it be her acquisition. If you can give it to her, even though she doesn't want it, but it only works if she's standing there. If she's not there, then no matana. So a gift, midaita, that only works if you that only works if you want it. By the get, it works even if you don't want it. So and by the get,
so it's not
and by the get, she needs to be standing there in order for it to be considered a get. So for sure, if the owner wants it, it only works when they want it. Like Kolshkin, for sure, you should have to be standing there. If the get only works, even though it could be thrown at the woman, and it only works if she's there, which means that the ability to give it over to her is so much stronger. And nevertheless, it only works if she's standing there. So a matana, which is much weaker to be given, you can only give a gift if the person wants to receive it. So for sure, it should only work if the person is there. We said no. We said that if there's a gift, it works even if the person is not there.
But you can refuse these other gifts.
That's right. The get, you can't refuse it. So should that be restrictor? The get, the fact that she cannot refuse the get. Is that more of a reason? I know. Is that more of a reason that you need to be standing there, or is it less of a reason that she needs to be standing there? The fact that you can throw it at her even if she doesn't want it. So originally we thought that was the reason why why she needs to be standing there,
I think maybe
because it's
less.
given against her will. Now Rav Sheshes Brei Ravidi says, no, that's the reason why she should not need to be standing there. And if she still needs to be standing there, then for sure by a gift you should have to be standing there.
Yesterday you mentioned like if you're giving someone a gift that like everyone would accept, and it's like for the benefit of him, is considered like he acquired it.
Oh,
but this
that's what Gemara says.
she
El
might,
Amar Rav Sheshes Rashi explains that. Rashi says, Chatzer is Rabbi Mishum Yad v'legar mishlichas. There's a difference between a divorce and a gift, because a gift, it's wanted. The person wants it. It's a benefit to by the divorce. See, there's two parts to the courtyard. The courtyard acquire. We're talking over here about a chatzer, a courtyard acquiring, with the person standing next to it. We have two possible sources. We were learning this yesterday. One possible source is that it's compared to her hand. She has an extended hand. Her hand can acquire her divorce, so too her courtyard. It's her extended hand. We had another possibility that maybe it's considered her agent, just like her agent can receive a gift, right? So too, now there's a limitation on each. Limitation on the courtyard is that it needs to be right next to it. The limitation on the hand is that just like the hand is very close, so too the courtyard needs to be right close by. So the courtyard to work as a hand is only if she's standing there. What about the courtyard working as an agent? So the agent only works if it's for the benefit of the person, but it won't work. You can't force someone to be an agent for someone else, right? If it's not to their benefit. If it's for their benefit, then yes. So by the get, where it's possibly not for her benefit, that was a whole discussion, but it's possibly not for her benefit. So then she needs to be standing there because it's only going to work as her hand, because it's not for her benefit. It won't work as a shliach. It works as a shliach, but only if it would be for her benefit.
we also had the example in Gittin where if the shliach was the woman, it immediately, like as soon as the shliach acquired, it was considered the get
That's
was
right.
done.
That's right. That would be the same as the courtyard, if it's not against her will.
No, but if she sends a shliach, it's because she wants it.
Right. So the courtyard would also work like that. Now, but by the gift, where it's a benefit, so that could work as a shliach, which means that the person doesn't need to be next to it. Yeah, that's how he's answering. Rav Ashi says that there's a difference, that chatzer is considered both a yad and no worse than shlichus. What does it mean, no worse than shlichus? In other words, if it's to her benefit, then it will work as a shliach. But if it's not to her benefit, then it won't work as a shliach. So by the gift, it would work, even though she's not standing there. Otherwise, it has to work as her hand, which means that she needs to be standing there. Okay, Gufa. We go back to analyze something that we learned before. It says, Rois and Ratzanach Metzia. If a person sees people running after something in his property, a deer with a broken leg, or a bird. Again, Rabbi Yirmiyah says, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that only works that his property should acquire, when he says, my property should acquire it for me, that only works if he would be able to run after it and catch the bird or the deer. Rabbi Yirmiyah had a question, this is all a quote from what we said in passing. Rabbi Yirmiyah said, what would happen if it would be a gift? So Rabbi Barkana said that even if he runs after it and can't catch it, then it would work, because there's less restrictions if it's given as a gift. Rav has a question. Let's say something is flying through his property. Someone takes a purse, throws it through someone's property, and it goes through one window and out the other window, through one door and out the other door. So there's a back door and a front door. The person says, I don't want this anymore, and he throws it, and it goes through someone's property, through both. Well, is it considered like it rested in his property and he acquired it? Jonathan, you were asking something like this. Is it considered that he acquired it or not? Amalei Rav Papa says to Rava, Amila Ravada Bar Masna Rava, some say it was Ravada Bar Masna, Amila Ravina Rava, some say it was Ravina to Rava. Lav Hainu Masnisen. That's our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, Rais and Ratzanach Metzia Daf, Rabbi Yechim Ushatz Rachim Magian. And Rabbi Yirmiyah says you have to be able to reach it. By Rabbi Yirmiyah, and Rabbi Yirmiyah had a question, does the same thing apply if it's a gift? And Rabbi Abba Bar Kana said that even if he can't catch it by a gift, it should work, which means that you don't have to be able to catch it if it's coming as a gift. Someone is giving it to you. This guy that's throwing it, I guess, is giving it to whoever gets it first, and you're claiming that you got it first. Well, Amalei Miskalgal Kamret, there's a big difference between if it's running on the ground or if it's flying through the air. Shani Miskalgal de Kamunach Dami. When it's rolling on the ground, we consider it as if it's actually on the property, as opposed to in the air but not landing, is not considered on the property. So that we would make a distinction here.
So if someone
Leave it over here.
have like a drone, right?
Yeah.
Airspace.
Yeah.
It's not your